Hello, welcome to this week's headlines. I'm Chwi Lynn. Here are your highlights. First, the 11th Malaysia Plan was announced yesterday and the government targets the economy to expand between 5 and 6% during the 5-year period of the plan. 2. Deputy Prime Minister Sri Muhyiddin Yassin said that Putrajaya must sack the 1MDB board for the 42 billion ringgit debt scandal or it will bring down the government. If you want to see his heartfelt speech, it's on YouTube. And now for the main story of the week that's been stranded in the news headlines, it's the Rohingya crisis. The plight of the Rohingya people is hopefully one that is familiar to most Malaysians, seeing that it does intimately involve our country. But we keep hearing that word in relation to it, plight. So before we discuss the recent ASEAN migrant crisis and our role in it, here's a quick recap of who the Rohingya people are and what they've had to go through. The Rohingya are a Muslim minority group who predominantly live in the isolated North Rakhine state of Western Myanmar. In 1978, many of them fled the country due to Operation Naga Min that aimed to root out people who lived in Burma illegally, resulting in violence, arrest, harassment, and the exodus of about 250,000 Rohingya. Under pressure from the international community, Burma took back the Rohingya in a repatriation agreement with Bangladesh. But less than 3 years later, the Burmese government passed the 1982 Citizenship Act, and I'd ask you to remember that, it's going to come up again later, which effectively denied citizenship to the Rohingya. Some 300,000 Rohingya then sought life in southern Bangladesh, where most are not recognized as refugees and are predictably unwelcome, with thousands then being forcibly returned to Myanmar. So there's this awful ping-pong with neither country wanting them. And meanwhile, back in home sweet home, more than 700,000 of them in northern Rakhine today are effectively stateless, denied basic human rights, facing severe restrictions on the right to marry, subject to forced labour, arbitrary land seizure, excessive taxes, and denied the right to travel freely. So I use home sweet home, but of course, that as a phrase here means absolutely nothing. These are people who are stateless, they're without protection, which is how they became part of an estimated 8,000 refugees stranded at sea. Now, this is really just the most recent and glaring manifestation of a crisis that ASEAN has really just helped to create. ASEAN's charter call for the promotion and protection of human rights and to uphold the United Nations Charter and international laws which came into force on December 18, 2008 is a legally binding agreement among the 10 member states, in which we say ASEAN should reasonably play an active role in providing humanitarian aid to the displaced Rohingya as well as in pressuring the Burmese government. Ironically, the worst part is that the leader of the Rohingya genocide, President Thein Sein, was then at the helm of ASEAN, and when speaking at Chatham House, London on June 15, said that there is currently no proposal to amend the 1982 law and the Parliament does not have any plan as yet. You might recall me telling you about that 1982 citizenship law, which currently denies full citizenship to the Rohingya Muslim people. Important. And that in some ways exemplifies the whole problem here, the divide between what the people want and what the government can give, and the gulf between what countries can request and pressure of one another. The groundswell of support and sympathy from the Malaysian people for the migrants on the boat was immense. People were petitioning our government to let them come to land, to let us bring them food, and trying to raise funds independently. Now, as a private citizen, as a human being, it's unconscionable to allow people fleeing persecution for a better life to starve at sea as we wait and watch. But what about from the point of view of the government? The argument here is that it nips the problem of people smugglers and prevents deaths at sea. Australia is a case in point. Now, they're very controversial on this, obviously, and Tony Abbott has said that preserving safety at sea by turning around boats and taking more vigorous action on the high seas is necessary, and he makes no apologies for it. And I quote, "The only way you can stop the deaths is to stop the people smuggling trade. The only way you can stop the deaths is, in fact, to stop the boats." Australia also banned migrants who arrive by boat from ever being able to settle permanently in the country. Deputy Home Minister Wan Junaidi shared the same tone. We have to send the right message that they're not welcome here. So we also have to ask ourselves, how much does it cost to host refugees? Turkey says that it has spent more than $2 billion hosting hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees, and the World Bank last month predicted that the Syrian crisis will have cost Lebanon $7.5 billion in economic losses by the end of 2014. So how many refugees are there within our borders then? As you can see, we have quite a fair number. But back to the present and the boats. Where do we find ourselves? Well, Malaysia and Indonesia have agreed to provide temporary shelter provided that the resettlement and repatriation process will be done in 1 year by the international community, according to Foreign Minister Anifah Aman. He went on to say, what we have clearly stated is that we will take in only those people in the high sea, but under no circumstances would we be expected to take each one of them if there is an influx of others. And earlier when we were turning them away, Malaysian Deputy Home Minister Wan Junaidi Jaafar said, "Well, what do you expect us to do? We have been very nice to the people who broke into our border, we've treated them humanely, but they cannot be flooding our shores like this." So that fear of having an influx of refugee arrivals continues, and it's a valid one, in that we have to ask whether we can afford to support them financially through the lengthy process of resettlement. But for me, it's pretty basic. No matter how very nice we are to them when they arrive at our shores, I think we can all agree that they shouldn't be here in the first place. Because we should all have been a part of getting their home country to acknowledge them as citizens, thereby offering them all the protection of the state. And that's what we should be working on, not slapping band-aids on a gaping wound when we're forced to and expecting it to just figure out its own healing process. And that is it from me this week on Headlines. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments, leave them in the box below. And even if you don't leave any comments, have a great weekend. I won't hold it against you.